Hi, and welcome to this immigration law conversation. In these conversations, I discuss with people current issues of immigration law. And these are informal and scripted conversations. They're not meant as specific legal advice, but we hope they're helpful to you and provide some valuable information. Today, I'm joined by Ali Terrell, who's an independent social worker and a director at Immigration Quick Social Work Services. Ali, thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to just tell people what you do and what Immigration Quick does?
Yes, so I'm an independent social worker. I've worked in statutory services for many years in adult social care. So I've got a lot of experience in mental health, adults with physical disabilities, older people, people with cognitive impairments. So quite a broad range. So I've used that experience and taken it to the immigration arena to complete independent social work reports for people in relation to unsettled status, visa applications, applications for leave to remain. And the company, we have a number of social workers across the UK from a different range of backgrounds, so from children's services, adult social care, mental health. And so we've developed an expertise using our statutory knowledge, but applying it to a different arena to look at needs, look at risks, and look at best interests, really. That's what we do.
That's fantastic. Now, often when people think of getting social work reports in immigration cases, they think commonly about children cases. Today, I wanted to specifically talk about adult cases because often it's something that's not thought about, but can be a real valuable piece of evidence, an expert opinion that can make a huge difference in cases. So I was thinking commonly, perhaps we have adult relatives who come and visit the UK and perhaps become ill and are dependent on family in the United Kingdom and have to make human rights applications. And for the lawyers watching, often the Home Office will cite cases like Kugathas, looking at what additional dependency there is. Or we perhaps have people coming to the UK who are caring for relatives who are settled here. And that's either an Article 8 application or a European Zambrano application. And again, the lawyers watching will know from the Patel and Shah case that with adult Zambrano cases, you need something exceptional to succeed. In assessing adult, say that first example, Ali, where somebody has older parents visiting them and the parents fall ill and they're dependent on their settled children in the United Kingdom, what does the assessment process look like? What do you look like when attending on a family and making that assessment of the care needs?
Well, I have carried out many assessments in those kinds of circumstances. So the assessment framework we use is based on social work theory and social work models. It's perhaps more akin to a social circumstances report for mental health tribunals, where we're looking at finances, environment, family background, family history, and then we look deeper into assessing the care and support needs of those people, of the individual, or if it's two people, obviously both of them individually. And what we would do, we would apply the relevant adult social care legislation to identify and establish needs. So we need to know, what are this person's needs, what kind of level are they, because they could be mild, they could be moderate, they could be severe, they could have significant needs. So we're using the adult social care legislation to benchmark what those needs are. And then we would look at, because in adult social care, we're always looking at informal carers roles as well. So then we would look at how those needs being met at the moment, whether through only informal care or through a combination of formal and informal care. When I say formal care, I mean paid care. So either paid carers coming to somebody's home, or residential care, or some other kind of formal arrangement. And so then other kinds of care or support the person might have might also include their GP, counselling services, or anything that's contributing to that person's needs being met. So we need to know what their needs are and how those needs are being met. And then towards the opinion part of the report would be looking at what would happen if that person's circumstances were to change and they no longer had access to that support that they've already got in place here. So in the example of a couple from abroad, we would be looking at what do they need. They're going to need that whether they're here or some other country. And so how would those needs be met in another place? And what would be the risks for those people of not having that support in place? So I'm kind of thinking of some examples of where somebody's got a history of perhaps not seeking support, self-neglect. And so that would be something we would be looking at. Obviously, different countries will have different care and support arrangements. Some might not have any support arrangements for their citizens. My role is not to be a country expert or to comment on the right or wrongness of the support arrangements in that country, but to look at how is this person going to manage without the support they've got currently here. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
But so the assessment itself, it's holistic. It does look at all the aspects of a person's life, and then it does include an analysis, an opinion of what would happen if a change of their circumstances. And also we do make recommendations if we think that there's something else that would improve their situation. Perhaps some minor equipment, perhaps they need further medical assessments. If the informal carers are residents of the UK, they might benefit from a formal carers assessment from their local authority to see what services there are to help them in their informal caring roles. Because often informal carers, and there's many in the UK, British citizens and non-British citizens, sometimes they're providing care 24/7. They need support as well. So it could be somebody to help with them getting their own shopping, or it might be somebody to come and sit for them to have a break and get out for a couple of hours. So it is quite a holistic assessment, and it's looking at the cared for person's needs and the informal carers' needs as well.
I think that's really helpful, both the thing about the holistic assessment to look at the family as a whole and the needs of both the person being cared for and the needs of the carer. I also liked what you said about not being a country expert. From a lawyer's perspective, whenever I get expert reports, I'm always worried that sometimes an expert perhaps has become an advocate and not maintained that independence. Yeah, which is always a big challenge. Just in relation to perhaps the people being cared for a British resident, so perhaps somebody's come from abroad to care for a family member. And actually, while I'm on that point, some people might not be aware that the Home Office have a policy called the Carers Policy. It's Chapter 17, Section 2 of the IDIs, where in exceptional circumstances, family members can be given leave to enter or leave to remain to care for a family member. But the idea of that is while they set up provision for care in the United Kingdom. Often the Home Office will argue, well, social services can meet the need. What do you say in terms of whether social services can meet needs and the difficulty, or what's the added benefit perhaps family members can add in terms of care? So when we've got, say, a British parents whose children have come from abroad to care for them.
Reflecting on my experience in adult social care, and we've got to remember that there is a duty for social care to meet presenting eligible needs, but not all needs will be eligible. So they would carry out their own assessment. They would look at what are the significant needs that we need to meet, and considering we've had many years of austerity, currently where we are with the coronavirus issue, the resources are very limited, and so the maximum support somebody would get at home would be 4 calls a day. And so if you're somebody who has no mobility and you're all care in bed, or you need to be hoisted from bed to chair, that means that you're on your own for significant periods of the day, and that itself is can have a negative impact on people's mental health and emotional well-being. But then the kinds of care support that might be provided in that situation would be the essential elements to maintain that person at home. So that would be things like meals, washing, transfers, I mean with a hoist or with equipment. We're not talking about other things like time to sit and talk to somebody, or time to encourage them to eat or to promote their mental health. We're not talking about things like supporting people with their religious needs, for example. And I know in Islam, people who have a disability, they're excused from some elements that are involved in the process of prayer. But some of those elements are very important to people, for things like the washing, the ritual preparation, the placing of mats, all of those things. And as we know, those prayer arrangements are several times throughout the day and night. So adult social care simply cannot meet those kinds of needs, but they might be very important to individuals. If somebody's needs are above and beyond that they can't be met through those 4 care calls a day, then really you're looking at people having to go into residential care or possibly nursing care. So if you had a couple, let's say, where one of the couple had that level of need, then we're looking then at people being separated, because adult social care, they wouldn't be able to fund a partner to live in residential care with somebody if that partner did not also have that level of need. So then we're looking at the impact on their right to family life, and all sorts of other issues. So I hope that answers the
Yeah,
question.
no, absolutely. I think 2 points to make in response to that. Just again, for the lawyers watching, there's a case called MS Malaysia from 2019, which in the context of a Zambrano adult case said that social work is not, it's a relevant factor, social care, I mean, but it's not a trump card. And sometimes it's treated as a trump card, the fact that there is social provision available. But you've drawn out, I think, perhaps the limits on that, but also those individualized needs that somebody's religious identity and personal identity is so important, and having those needs met is key to their well-being. Is there anything, often I come across clients in both contexts we've talked about, where having a family member care for them is so culturally important? Is there anything you wanted to reflect on in relation to that?
Well, again, I would say it's really difficult. Many people, and if we were in this position ourselves, who would we be preferring to care for us? Many people, they don't seek support. They find it really difficult to accept people coming into their home. They don't respond that well to formal care, and so you often get to a point where the person providing the care really needs to have a good understanding of the cared for person's behaviour, their presentation, if they're withdrawn. And if we're talking about people who are non-verbal, who can't communicate verbally, and you're dependent on observations of behaviour to know what that person actually needs, and to respond or to anticipate what that person needs at a given time, then that's when it becomes really difficult for formal carers to meet those needs, because they might be different carers every call. They might not have ever met that person before. So if you're trying to support somebody who's perhaps low in mood, withdrawn, or whatever reason, doesn't seek support, and I think in those kinds of situations, that's when it's really, really important that the people caring for them do know them and can anticipate their needs and kind of preempt a deterioration, if you like, if somebody's not taking the medication or not eating or not saying, well, this is how I feel or this is what I need, and that's, you know, kind of across the board. So that's it's not just people who are being cared for by carers from abroad. That's you know, that can happen to anybody. Um, so yeah, I suppose an example, my own grandmother who had capacity, um, she was somebody like that. She would not seek support. She wouldn't ask for any help at all. And so between us, we cared for her at home for as long as we could do, um, which I think, you know, provided her with the best quality care that she could have. She was happy to be supported by family members, um, and we did try paid care, but it wasn't successful because they didn't know. They, you know, often they haven't met her, and they just simply didn't know her emotional needs or how best to support her to engage in her care.
That's really helpful. Just in a practical way, how do you do assessments? Do you go and see families? How long do you spend with them? Can I just put a caveat on that? Obviously, we're recording this in June 2020. Even though lockdown has eased, we've still got some social distancing. So perhaps you could tell me two things. Perhaps you could tell me how you do it normally and then how you're doing it at the moment.
Okay, so usually, yes, it would be a home visit or a visit to wherever the person was. Um, Generally, in these cases, they're at home somewhere, or so they're living in the community. But if they were in a hospital or any other placement, we would go. I've visited people living in a temple. So wherever the person is, we would go and see them. Um, One of the most important things is that we have a letter of instruction from the solicitor so that we know specifically which questions we need to be responding to, because that's going to help us direct the assessment as well if there's something specifically that needs a reply or more explanation. So we would go and see them, we would speak to them and their care, the person that's caring for them. We would do observations. We would have a look around the property, perhaps to see what equipment they'd got in place, see how suitable it is for them. So that would usually be around 2 hours. If it's an interpreter required, then we would expect that to be arranged and facilitated. We don't like to rely on family members for interpretation. Um, we do understand that cost is an additional factor in terms of interpretation, but best practice is always to have an independent interpreter. So then, in addition to that, we would be looking at the documents provided. We would like to see occupational therapy reports, doctor's letters, medical reports, video reports, anything else that might provide further evidence to support what we're seeing. So the assessment information is the observation. It is, and it's quite difficult in social work. You do kind of have an intuitiveness around the assessment as well, and I don't think it's something that I can explain very well, other than when you meet somebody and you can see, you know, what they're saying to you, what the information is it consistent? Is there more? Are they not telling you all of the story? You know, perhaps, and often with people, older people, they underestimate their care and support needs. So it might be teasing out a little bit more about how they do things, how they manage, if something would make that easier. So again, it's all based on social work models and theories, but there's a lot of skill in it as well. I would have to say. And then again, speaking to the informal carers, speaking to any of the relevant parties. Sometimes it might involve that you actually do need to speak to their GP or mental health worker or other relevant clinicians who know that person a lot better because they've had a long-term involvement with them. So it's a range of things that contribute towards the assessment, and then that enables us to, as I said, identify their care and support needs and draw some conclusions really in terms of going forward.
What about now during COVID? How are you modifying what you have to do?
Yes, so again, it's been a challenge, but it's been a challenge for everybody, I think. So we have been doing assessments via video link. Obviously, the documents are so important at this point in time that we have the relevant documents and information to also review and analyse. If it's somebody that's perhaps non-verbal or withdrawn, somebody I recently did an assessment with, I did have to ask the informal carers to hold the camera up so that I could have a little bit of an observation and try to engage them, it is quite difficult. So ideally, we would also like to, if we can, and with the lockdown easing a little, at least have sight of the person. So that might be a brief visit to their property, and if it's the safest way, just a bit of a conversation through the window, possibly with a phone, just so that we can at least see them, because again, seeing people gives such a lot of information about their mobility and their kind of the way that they're processing information, if they're engaging with people. So yes, it is a challenge, but it's not insurmountable.
That's brilliant. In terms of just two things you raised, I think is so important. You emphasize the documents. I think often a failing I see is where experts like yourself are not provided perhaps with all the refusal documents or perhaps previous refusals, because I know the tribunal are often concerned where an expert, whatever type of expert it is, doesn't know the full picture, particularly perhaps where there's been judicial findings previously on a relationship, and that'll be their starting point. So I think it's so important. The second point you raised, which I think is so important, is about the provision of independent interpreters, because again, I've seen social work reports criticized because of using a family member as an interpreter. So I think you raised so important points. Ali, that's so helpful today and really helpful to talk to you. It's brought out some great stuff. If people want to contact you direct, what I'm going to do is obviously all the case law and policy I've referred to, I'll put below this video. I'll also put your details and Immigration Quick's details. But if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Telephone, email, either. We provide a 7-day service, so we will always respond at the soonest opportunity. If people, we're very happy to offer a initial telephone consultation. If people have got matters that they're not sure if it's something that we can assist with, or if they just want to talk through the issue and talk through how we would approach that piece of work, we're very happy to do that, no charge. Give us a call and we can talk through and see if it is something that we can assist with. And often we do get a lot of inquiries from people for a range of reasons. Sometimes there are things that we can't assist with because actually we need to direct them to another service like the local authority or even the police or some kind of safeguarding. So yes, we just pick up the phone, talk to us, and we can see if we can help.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to me today, Ali. That's great. Hopefully I'll see you in person soon, but until then, stay safe and well.
Thank you.
No worries. Bye-bye.